Welcome back to Read Poems Every Day. Today I'm going to continue my slow reading of Donika Kelly's poem, What is the Measure? In my first video about this poem, I didn't get much past the first two steps in my process of slowly getting to know a poem. Step one being reading the poem out loud, step two, counting some beans. Today I'm going to move on to the third step, which deals with sound and sense, listening for sound and sense. The poem begins with a fantastic first line that is sonically pleasing. So let's track some sonically pleasing phrases and lines. The first one being, I catalog what I cannot capture, right? So you have the repetition of I, but also the repetition of the hard C, K sounds, catalog, cannot, capture, and even the beginning, the CA sound at the beginning of each of those words, the repetition of T's there. So we have repetition, alliteration going on there. We could probably track some of those sounds through the rest of the stanza, but you don't have the same patterning of the k sounds, catalog, cannot, capture. Let's scroll through just a little further, see if there's other things we can spot here. Maybe I should read just for fun this stanza, see if anything stands out. For instance, there is no way to measure the peak against the distance from the tip of one ring finger to the other, no matter my arm's position, outstretched, limp, akimbo. Really loving that line, my arm's position, outstretched, limp, akimbo. So you have the um, consonant patterns here, which just another way of saying alliteration perhaps. You have the M's, you have the P's in that line. You also have the multiple multiple pauses multiple pauses that are noted by that are marked by the colon and the commas. So that line, just one short line, has four punctuation marks. You have the colon, two commas, then the hard pause of the period at the very end. And of course you have another pause in the next line with another colon. So in just a very short amount of space you have this sort of really controlled kind of rhythm introducing itself. What else? Um, Here we go. This is such a great set of lines here, and a repetition. So you have earth, 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 my body, its bones, its sacks, its meat, and animating light. So the again you have the B's, the repetition of M's, the its, and then its meat and animating light. So you have the T's there as well that are followed by I submit. So again you have an M and a T sound there. What else do we have? In spite of the palette of old quilts. So again, T sounds and the P sounds. Some more M's in the next line. Maple leaves I've made at its immeasurable base. Okay, anything else? Burrows or bounds. It's just short phrase, only one repetition of B there, but such a great phrase. Burrows or bounds. Never mind what I hear. Never mind, I hear what scurries or scatters. Oh gosh, there we go again. Scurries. I probably should have just read the poem again. out loud, but that's okay. Bent grass, bald crown. Might include these here. Bent grass, bald crown. And then we're very near. Well, actually, we still have quite a few lines to go here. Um, all of which withers or writhes. All of which. Okay. Foot's next fall. So as you can see, I'm just basically just tracking and getting a sense of the alliterative clusters here. Ragging the rock face. I mean, there's just so many. Usually I don't pull out this many phrases. My goodness. Your arm, your palm, your mouth, your eyes. So there we have the repetition. Repetition there. Gives up its gravity. Lets loose its bodies. I think is do you think there's supposed to be a comma there? Its bones. I don't have Kelly's book uh, nearby, so I would otherwise catch it. Also note the way the final lines repeat this, repeat not just words, but sonic clusterings, sonic patterns from earlier in the poem. Okay. I do think it's interesting that the poem in the ways that it plays with alliteration and repetition is musical in a sense, and it does seem important that there is a aesthetic, almost musical connotation to the word measure that we might not initially catch if we are reading the poem just for the first time. Let's think about the prose sense of the poem. Let's say section one. Section one introduces an I that catalogs, but also senses, hmm, senses what the I is incapable of. Catalog becomes description, but that description is in some sense what? Hmm. Imprecise or inexact necessitates a kind of infidelity or non-mimetic. I don't know. Um, a non-mimetic repetition. So inexact is precisely a word used here. Maybe I won't, yeah, name this just yet as stanza one because I do think it's important to kind of give the poem, not sort of tie the poem's prose organization or the movement of its situation into just these specific clusterings, because it does seem to me that let's just do sort of like section one ish. Section two. Examples. Some examples here. We have distance and weight as different kinds of measurings. Poetically, the distance and gravity are tied not so much to a landscape, but to a body figured by landscape or a landscape figured by a body. And so the measure becomes somewhat eroticized here, although it's not, excuse me, it's not necessarily super clear that that's what's going on. And I'm saying that with a sense to the turn the poem is going to take at the end. So we move on from examples to sub, submissions, right? I wonder in what degree submit differs from, to what degree does a submission differ from an example? Does it include an invitation to evaluate? I have to think more about that. Excuse me. These submissions are also confessions of a kind or clarifications that the I is not the mountain or field. Though the poet insists on a kind of interaction or relationship with what they fail to measure uh, exactly. So this section here, my cat Casimir is potentially going to announce himself on camera. We'll see if he does that or not. Hello, pal. Hey, buddy. So we have these contained sections I submit, but then we have maybe these elaborations here. Never mind, I hear what scurries. Never mind, I raise my hand to hover. Which seems a kind of, you know, elaboration of the poet's position is then followed by an analogy of mountain to field and then field to an addressee, a you. So the you does not really come in until, you know, really the fifth section of the poem. As I'm dividing it out here, there are probably other ways to um, think that through. Section 6, the you is then described, becomes the standard against which the more imposing landscape figures, mountain, field. Um, uh, becomes the standard, replacing replacing the imposing landscape figures. In section 7, the U becomes not just a standard of measurement, but a new measurer, the one whose foot now falls, a more exacting measurer. You harrow and the summit rise. Um, and the words used earlier in the poem take on new connotations. And the erotic dimensions of the poem become clarified, hmm. Sort of sensuously suggest and explicitly hmm, reinforced, though still somewhat suggestive. So I wanted to say something like it was explicitly suggestive, but that doesn't make any sense. So that something is sort of more explicitly sort of pointed out here, a connotation of what the poem is up to, though it still remains somewhat subjective. Okay, before I lose this, I'm going to post that, and then take a look at what I say here. So the prose sense, again, we have an I at the very beginning of the poem that introduces itself as a figure or as a persona that is measuring things being seen, but also indicating a kind of debility, like an or inability to actually exactly measure those things. And we get examples of distance and weight. And the landscape figures, the field, the mountains, are also associated in a poetic way with the body or with bodies. The section then moves on to acknowledging a kind of distinction or separation between the eye and the body, the fields and the mountains, but an acknowledgement that also insists on a kind of sensuous relationship all the same. Whatever this might mean, we're going to sort of bracket out and worry about later. And it's only then that the poet then turns to you. So this whole kind of overview of measuring large things, landscapes, mountains, fields, traversing them, trying one's best to kind of encompass them through language and through cataloging, using language, using the body, becomes a framework for thinking potentially about an erotic relationship, a sexual relationship, or at the very least a kind of love, and how love becomes a new framework of measure, so to speak. And again, that measuring is also related then to the sort of poetic musicality of the poem itself as a kind of measuring, of a kind of embodying and animating of a relationship. I hope that makes sense. What is the measure? Okay. So let's pause there again. I want to go slow, and I've taken about 20 minutes just to move through sound and sense of the poem. And maybe next time we'll move through form and figures and then ideas and questions. I think the last two videos we've done the hard work of really attempting to get to know the poem and its movements, to track and count a lot of its features, And now maybe we're ready to get down to some the sort of more interpretive pieces of my process of slowly getting to know a poem. And then I might even correct that typo so that it says contexts instead of content. Okay. Well, thanks for rereading this poem with me today. Maybe before I go, we'll read it out loud one more time. I think it's worth hearing it, maybe at every stage of the process. So let's do it one more time. What is the Measure by Donika Kelly for M. I catalog what I cannot capture. The sun, its ragged stumble into rock face. That's so interesting. Sorry, I'm just pausing my own reading aloud. I've stumbled over that line a few times. I don't know why. I want to read stubble for some reason, which is maybe a bit of a Freudian slip. Anyway, I catalog what I cannot capture. The sun, its ragged stumble into rock face. The precise elevation of this plateau or the next, the sea, of course, against which everything is measured, this, of course, anticipating the line where you becomes the standard of measurement. My tools are inefficient, inexact. For instance, there is no way to measure the peak against the distance from the tip of one ringed finger to the other. No matter my arms positioned, outstretched, limp, akimbo. For instance, there is no way to weigh. I didn't catch that in my sonically pleasing list. But anyway, there is no way to weigh the earth pushed out of earth against the gravity of my body, its bones, its sacks, its meat and animating light. I submit, I do not constitute the mountain. This in spite of the palette of old quilts and newly fallen maple leaves I've made at its immeasurable base. I submit I do not constitute the field, although I have harrowed its length, its width, with my narrow feet, my slow step. Never mind I hear what scurries or scatters, what burrows or bounds. Never mind I raise my hand to hover the bent grass, the echinacea's bald crown, all of which withers or writhes, all of which is new or nearly the same before my foot's next fall. I submit, as with the mountain, the field, as with the field, you, ineluctable as a season, sun, ragging the rock face. Note the difference here. The ragged stumble becomes a ragging, right? Your arm nearly as long as mine, your palm wider, your mouth a beginning, your eyes, of course, against which everything else is measured. So the eyes, not just the you, but the you's eyes are become the new standard. You harrow and the summit writhes, your broad foot falls and the field akimbo gives up its gravity, lets loose its bodies, its bones, thrums an animating light. I hope you catch, if you watched my previous video, how, having spent so much time with the poem now, my own reading of it is now more animated. All right, maybe I'll keep going with this poem, working through each of the steps. We'll see. Either tomorrow or the next day, we'll move on to form and figures. And even if it takes a little longer, I think maybe we'll also wrap up with ideas and questions, contexts, and maybe anticipate what might change if we come back to it and look back at it after some time has passed. Thanks for reading poems with me today. We'll see you tomorrow.